Welcome to the Science of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Culver, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us today. We share real stories and give you tips, tricks, and strategies to fit kindness into your life. Enjoy and know that you are a bright light in this world. Welcome back to the Science of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Culver, and I'm super grateful that you are here today and that you are tuned in and listening. As I record this episode today, I see the sun shining and the birds chirping and the greenery all around me, and it just encourages me to find deep gratitude. And I'm grateful for every single one of you who listen and who chime in and who are part of this journey with us on this podcast as we continue to grow and to continue to reach more people across the globe. And to say the globe in the opening conversation is so wild to me, but I also want to express my deepest gratitude. And I also want to start with a moment that honestly felt really small at the time, but that moment stayed with me for a while that caused me to have deep reflection. And I was like, I got to share that on the podcast. I was out of town recently, driving from the airport to my destination where I was headed, and everything felt really normal. The GPS was going well, the route was set, I was following the directions. If you know me and you've been in my workshops, you know that I talk about how I'm always jamming out to music, or sometimes I'm not. But in this respective space, I was jamming out to some music in the car. I was just trying to get the vibes right. I was headed to where I was going, and I was about to approach this roundabout. And if anyone has navigated a roundabout before, we know sometimes it can be really exhilarating and sometimes really scary. There's all kinds of emotions that come with it. And so as I entered the roundabout, the GPS on my phone said, take the second turn. Simple enough, right? I thought, okay, cool. I'm going to take the second turn, keep going. We got this. So as I'm jamming, as I'm driving, I got into the middle of the roundabout and my foot came off the gas of the car and I began to stall. And right there, I could feel the engine shift and the car behind me began to become closer in the rearview mirror as I looked, and my car began to slow down. And right there in the middle of it, I began to have a panic attack of shame, doubt, worry, fear. All these things came over me in a moment because my foot came off of the gas. And eventually I'd get my foot back on the gas and I'd get to the second turn and I'd get through the roundabout. But what happened as I was driving further to my destination, it took me back to when my foot slipped off the gas, because I had this thought. My foot slipping off the gas is exactly what happens a lot in life way too often. Hear me out. We're moving, we're making progress, we're in the middle of something great, right? Maybe it's a dream, maybe it's a healing process, maybe it's a relationship, maybe you achieved a career goal or a career transition, maybe you have had just a life transition, or you relocated or had a baby, right? We're doing all these things, we're making progress, we're achieving these great aspirations, and then bam, something happens, or our foot comes off the gas. And it's not because we wanted it to happen, or it's because we wanted our foot to come off the gas. Sometimes it's a distraction. Sometimes it's stress, it's disappointment, it's fear, burnout, overwhelm, uncertainty. And suddenly, when all of those things start happening, our momentum or our gas disappears. Think about somewhere in your life where this has happened recently, right? Maybe there was a project you were super excited about, and then you lost momentum. Or maybe there's a goal that you were working to achieve, and you stopped pursuing it. Maybe there's a conversation that you know you need to have, but you keep avoiding it. Or maybe there's a version of yourself that you're disconnected from. And I'll be vulnerable with you. I feel like I am on the roller coaster of ride when it comes to physical health journey. January 2025, I started the Hard 75 Challenge, and it was really difficult. And I remember having to make modifications and accommodations along the way just so my body could adjust. But one thing that I committed to is I moved my body for 30 to 45 minutes for 75 days straight, and I committed to logging my calorie count for 75 days straight. Now, mind you, 75 days came and went, and life threw a bunch of lemons at me in the summer of 2025 with deaths and family and relocation, oh my. And I slowly slipped out of that structure and that habit. And since then, I've been on this roller coaster of up and down of wanting to do this. And so when I ask you, is there a version of yourself you're disconnected from? I have to be vulnerable in that I'm disconnected from that version too because of the inconsistency. Right? You see, we're all moving, myself included, but then we have those moments where we stall, just like I did. And let's talk about what happens when all of this transpires within the brain. Because when stress or uncertainty increase, the nervous system shifts quickly into protection mode. So instead of focusing on our growth, our creativity, or on our movement, the brain immediately starts prioritizing safety. Am I safe here, right? Certainty. Is this clear? Or survival. Do I need to be in a fight or flight response? And neurologically, that can look like hesitation. It can look like overthinking. It can look like avoidance. It can look like procrastination. And it can even look like emotional shutdown. That's why stalled momentum can feel really frustrating, because part of you wants to move while another part of you is trying to protect you, right? And I'll be honest with you. Life has thrown a lot of lemons our way between last summer and this summer, between summer of 2025 and summer of 2026. And I can say confidently, the lack of momentum is so frustrating because part of me wants to move, but part of me wants to protect myself from saying, you are exhausted, you're tired. But I know the moment I move my body and I get out there and do all the things, the feel-good chemicals that I'm looking for are going to be released into my body. I want you to remind yourself here today, you are not lazy. Your nervous system is trying to keep you safe. No matter what the situation is, no matter what the experience might be, right? I'm vulnerably expressing some of the challenges and some of the setbacks and some of the stalls that I've had related to my own journey, but it doesn't mean that I'm lazy, right? Research shows that when we have stress in our life, right, our body is trying to protect us from that stress, but when we have that stress in our life, it impacts our ability to make decisions. It impacts our level of clarity, and it impacts our ability to take action, to actually take movement, to be motivated, to have that momentum, and to take action. So that moment that I'm talking about at the roundabout, that's not just a mechanical moment, right? It's really neurological if you ask me. And to be honest, I really believe that moment where my foot came off the gas really is life in an essence sometimes. Because there's ways in which all of us stall. For example, let's talk about the goals and the purpose and all the things that drive us in life. You start off really freaking excited. Think about when you start your first couple days on the job, right? You're really excited. You're in that honeymoon phase. You're motivated. You're inspired. You're focused. And then exhaustion hits. Doubt enters your mind. Shame takes over. Criticism happens. Lack of belonging is felt. Right? And slowly in those moments, in those instances, your foot slowly comes off the gas and you begin to tell yourself, maybe I'm not capable. Maybe I'm not disciplined enough. But maybe in that moment, you just got overwhelmed. I'm vulnerably sharing about my own physical health journey, and I'll share that in the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, I was I'm going to start on Monday kind of guy. And I think that kind of still resonates in some aspects of my life with some different things that I start. And so I had some friends that said, on your tombstone, it's going to say start on Monday or start on January 1st or whatever. And I've been reading a lot of research in the last year that talks about it doesn't matter what day you start as long as you start. And I think that's a great reminder for all of us, especially myself in this moment. And I think back to the pandemic in 2020, I was transitioning out of a really toxic work environment, and I was transitioning into a new school district. And I began running with different members of the district and even with my partner, Kelly. And so we would wake up every morning, 5:30 or 6, we would meet up, and we did the Couch to 5K app for the complete weeks that were there. And to be honest with you, friends, at first I was like, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. And I remember those first days of running because you're running in intervals. If you've never done Couch to 5K, you're walking and then you're running over several days and weeks. And then over time, you're increasing your running by the end of the program, you're able to run a 5K within 30 minutes, or that's a suggested timeline. So I remember in the first couple of weeks of running, I would be out on the trail or on the blacktop or wherever we were in respective space. And I remember the internal thoughts coming into my mind saying, you can't do this. You can't do this. You're never going to be able to do this. You're too this, you're too that, right? And over time, I just kept going. And what I realized is those internal thoughts can be loud. Those negative thoughts can be loud, but they're not always true. And I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. And I remember there was a fall day at the completion of the the couch to 5K, and I had come home from school, and we didn't run that morning together just because it had been a hectic morning. And I'd come home from school and I was exhausted, right? That moment of exhaustion had hit, and criticism was happening, and there was all of these changes happening because of the pandemic, and we were navigating really uncertain and uncharted waters. And I came home from school that day, and I ran inside and I put on my shoes, and I remember just turning on the couch to 5K, and I was going to follow the app. And I kept running and I kept running and I kept running. And I remember turning into this another part of the neighborhood that I'd never been. And I kept running and running. And I was running for quite a length of time. And I looked down on my watch and it showed I'd been running for 20 minutes. And I looked at my phone and the Couch to 5K app had never opened. And so in real time, I had overcome those challenges or those thoughts that I couldn't do something, right? And so I share that with you because how many of us are in that same space where we say, I'm not capable. I can't do this. I'm not worthy of my goal. I can't achieve the thing I want to do. But really, maybe it's not that thing. Maybe it's we're so overwhelmed. And maybe we're so overwhelmed that it impacts us emotionally. And when we show up and impacts an emotional state, sometimes that can impact our relationships, right? So that can stall. Our relationships can shift. Our relationships can stall because maybe we stop communicating honestly. Maybe in those relationships, it doesn't have to be a loved one, right? It can be a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a faith-based relationship. Maybe we stop communicating honestly. Maybe we stop showing up fully, and maybe we stop engaging deeply. And it's not because we don't care. It's because something became emotionally unsafe. And instead of pressing forward, we froze. And friends, I can recall a situation where that's happened to me recently. I had created a story in my head about a situation, about an individual, that I cut back my engagement and my distance all the way. And when I brought something up, they said, I thought you may feel that way. But rather than saying anything, I had frozen for so long. And how many of us freeze or cut off or disconnect completely, and it damages relationships so long? How many of us stall and when our foot slips off the gas when it comes to relationships? But when reality knows we're wired for connection. And if we would have compassion and empathy and connect with one another, it may change the conversation. The other thing that may stall outside of our goals, our dreams, and our relationships is our personal growth, right? And this one hurts the most. Let me be honest with you, because we are always growing. We are healing. We are changing. We are navigating. But then when something is triggered, all of a sudden, the old fear comes back. All of a sudden, that old shame shows up. All of a sudden, those old patterns may manifest into our life. And suddenly, you stopped moving, not because growth ended, but because your nervous system got so dang overwhelmed it didn't know what to do, right? We are so conditioned to have approval from other people. We are so conditioned to seek affirmation or approval in society, especially when you think about working in environments where there are chain of command. And I say environments and I say chain of command because that's not respective to just work. That can be school, that can be organizational leadership, that can be elected leadership, faith-based organizations, work environment. I mean, really, that's applicable to anywhere. And when that happens, we stop moving. And I think about a time in which I was putting myself out there in a season of transition. I was trying to navigate what is it I'm going to do after walking away from a really toxic environment. And I remembered every time I would have a conversation, because of previously lived experiences of not being seen, not being heard, not being valued, not being elevated with my voice, not even being trusted to do my job in aspect, in some essence, because of micromanagement and poor leadership. When I was putting myself out there and sending messages or engaging in conversation or publishing articles or putting out blogs or creating content, every time for a matter of moments, I would have to navigate this thought of, what is that fear? What is this shame? Where is this pattern coming from? And so many of us have the same thing and we're scared to talk about it. And I want you to know you're not alone. The reality is we have to recognize it so that we can move through it, because we stopped moving and our growth didn't end. We got overwhelmed and we have to take action to get out of it. So I want to pause here for a moment. Ask yourself, where have you stalled? Maybe it is your growth and development. Maybe it is your dreams and your aspirations. Maybe there is a relationship, right? Or where have you caused your foot to come off the gas in any respective area of your life? And where have you been judging yourself instead of understanding yourself? Because we've talked about it on the podcast before. Be kind to your mind. Self-compassion lights up the most neural pathways in your brain. Here's the most important part that matters most. You have a choice, friend. Even in the middle of the roundabout, even if you've lost momentum, even if everything feels like a dumpster fire, you have the power that is not stalling. It is not that the power is not stalling. The power is recognizing I can press the gas again. You can put your foot back on the pedal. That's agency. That's resilience. That's growth. That's being kind to your mind. That's seeing every opportunity as an opportunity to grow. Because momentum is never built by perfection. It's built by re-engagement. And this is where kindness changes everything, friend. Not that everything's okay. That's that kindergarten kindness that we continue to talk about. But the kindness that I'm talking about is a real kindness. Kindness that says, I'm not going to attack myself. I'm going to have grace, love, and light. I'm going to understand what happened. I'm going to create an action plan of how to move forward. I'm going to take one honest step forward, and I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to say I should do something, because when I say should, I know that I'm shoulding on myself. And when I should on myself, I create fight or flight response in my brain. Kindness interrupts all of the shame, because shame says you failed, but kindness says you paused and you're regrouping for a new day. If I would have given up on that Monday, if I would have given up on any of the days of running, if I would have given up on the hard 75 or any of those things and never restarted the next day, we could be looking at a different outcome. What I've said is I've paused along the way and my foot's coming off the gas, but I've made small incremental changes and growth opportunities along the way. Shame, saying I failed, and kindness, saying I paused, those are not the same things. Some of you are so damn hard on yourselves that your nervous system is in a fight or flight response. So here's the deal, friend. It's okay to stall, but we have to have awareness once we stall. And once we have awareness after our stall, we have to have self-kindness to ourselves, because once we're kind to ourselves, it allows us to generate and take action. So many of us are fearful to re-engage after a fear, right? To do something after we've been rejected or we've been told no. Friends, I will be vulnerable. I was rejected more times than I care to admit when I was applying for my first round of interview, my first round of being an administrator. I mean, it was double digits. And I remember every time it would be, you're so close, you're so great, you're so this, right? And at first, I internalized every single rejection. And at first, I said, I'm done applying for these positions. I don't want to put myself in this position. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, right? And I remember in conversation, Kelly was really encouraging and really motivating, right? To put my foot back on the gas and to keep going. And more times than I care to admit, I would interview and be rejected, interview and be rejected. And it was near the start of the school year. And it was in the beginning of August. And I'd interviewed for my last, what I had told myself, this is the last position I'm going to interview for. And within days, I got another call saying, we'd like to interview you for this position. And what I didn't realize is the call that they wanted to interview me for would be the very last interview that I would participate in before landing an administrative position. And in the moments of working in that administrative position that was super toxic, I didn't realize why I was there. But I think back, had I not re-engaged my foot on the gas or re-engaged after the fear of rejection, I may not have worked in that environment that was toxic. But I also would have never found the science of kindness, the power of kindness, earned my doctorate, done research, all of these things that have led to these really awesome opportunities. And so in those moments of darkness, in that moment of doubt, in that moment of fear, in that moment of shame, it's vital that we re-engage. It's vital that we put our foot back on the gas. So I want you to hear me when I say this. Acknowledge where you are right now. If you are stalled or you feel like you are stalled, acknowledge where you are. Not with judgment. You're not behind. You're paused, right? We just clarified that. And I want you to take one small action forward. You don't need to have the whole plan figured out. Just what will be your next step. And I want you to interrupt that overthinking. Remember, those negative thoughts can be loud, but it does not mean they are true. When we take action, action creates clarity. And when we have clarity, it allows us to continue moving forward. But without action, there is no clarity. We must take action to find the clarity, because when we do so, remember that momentum rebuilds quickly. It starts with one push, one decision, one movement forward, one action. So when I think back to that roundabout, I really didn't stay stalled in that roundabout. I pressed the gas again. And in a lot of the stories that I've shared vulnerably through our time together today, I pressed the gas again. And I ended up getting where I needed to go. And maybe that's the reminder for today. You're not stuck forever. You're not broken. You're not incapable. Maybe your foot just came off the gas, and maybe today is the day that you're going to push the gas again and you're going to press forward. Because kindness is the reframe. It's not being hard on yourself. It's having love and light with yourself. Because, sweet friend, remember, if you can't find the light, be the light. And often the light you're looking for is the one that you carry on the inside. I'm so grateful that you are here today. If this resonated with you, comment, share, let everyone know. Perhaps this resonated with somebody else and you think they might need to hear this message as well. Send this over to them and make sure you subscribe and follow along, because we're always sharing tips, tricks, and strategies and vulnerable stories of how kindness is applicable to you and to your life. And if you haven't done so, check out the Orange Sparrow's Journey at orangesparrow.org and Be the Light, the Science of Kindness and the Power of Belonging at drchrisculver.com. And make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, because we're always doing great work. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And if you haven't heard it today, I'm rooting for you and I love you always, friend. Until next time, I'll see you soon.
The Science of Kindness podcast is hosted by Dr. Chris Culver. Our executive producer is Jake Doberens. This podcast was created in conjunction with Theophany Media.